Hi everyone, my name is Shauna in case you don't know, and welcome back to another video. In today's video I'm going to be ranking all of the books in the Twilight series. I recently finished the Twilight series, so all the books are really fresh in my brain. I overall really enjoyed this series. It is one of my favorite series of all time. However, some are definitely better than others. So I thought it would be fun to rank them and give my overall thoughts on all of them. I'm going to be ranking all 8 books in the Twilight series. I will not be ranking the graphic novels because the graphic novels are ridiculously expensive and I don't have that kind of money. But I got a lot of the Twilight series used. And also there's this thing called Book Fairies, so a couple of these I got from Book Fairies. So I only actually bought 2 of these new. All the other ones were used or gotten from Book Fairies. Don't worry, I Book Fairy people back when I have the money. Anyways, let me pull up my cheat sheet list because I wrote the rankings down so that I wouldn't forget. I literally play all my videos in the background. Totally normal thing to do. So without further ado, let's crack on into this video, starting with favorite and going to least favorite. I think my ranking will make a lot of sense to most people, but there may be a couple that will shock you with my ranking and what order I put them in. Number 1 is the first book, Twilight. I just loved all of the versions of the characters in this one. I found this one to be a very enjoyable read. It was a nice escape from reality, and I always look back on this one. This is also the movie that I rewatched the most, and Twilight will always be my number 1 favorite. It's one that made me fall in love with the series. It's the one that's the most lighthearted and fun, and Twilight was a 5-star read for me. So Twilight is number 1 on my list. Number 2 on my list is Eclipse. Eclipse is the 3rd book in the Twilight series. Eclipse comes in at number 2 because I loved how all of the vampires and werewolves were all together in this story. I definitely had some issues with this one in particular, but it was a 5-star read for me. I really enjoyed it. I thought there was such fun battle scenes in here. It has the best battle scene in the whole entire series. It is such a fantastic book, and there's a reason why this one ranks above New Moon, and I will tell you that in one sec. So next up is New Moon. This is a 5-star read for me as well. The reason why this one ranks 3rd is because my favorite characters are Alice and Jacob, and this one focuses purely on Jacob. There isn't a good blend of the 2 of them. Alice is in here for very small parts. So that's why this one is ranking lower than Eclipse, because Eclipse had a nice balance of my 2 favorite characters. New Moon also can't go higher on my list because Bella is very depressed in this book, and I found that I really enjoyed this book, but there were times where I felt Bella's depression, and so it really dragged me down. But it's such a phenomenal book, but it is depressing, so I understand why some people wouldn't like it, but I really love this one. And here is where I think my ranking is gonna sort of shock people. So the 4th one on my list is the Twilight Illustrated Guide. I gave this one 4 stars. This one is the 4th one on my list because I loved the backstory that it gave to Alice and to Victoria and to a bunch of the minor characters, and I loved the interview with the author in here, and I loved how this book lets you relive everything from the series. It has all the major plot points in the series. There is a reason why Breaking Dawn is later in this list, and I will explain it in a little bit once I pull Breaking Dawn up, but the Twilight Illustrated Guide is definitely at number 4 on my list. And this is one of the best companion guides to a series that I've ever read. If you like Twilight but you're wondering if this one is worth the money, it is worth the money. This is one of the ones that I bought new, and I really enjoyed this one. And number 5 on my list is Breaking Dawn. And I know a lot of people love Breaking Dawn, but Breaking Dawn to me wasn't as good as the original series, and I found more flaws in it than the other books in the series. There is really extreme pedophilia in here. And my major issue with this book in particular is that most of the characters feel like completely different characters than what they felt like in the previous 3 books. And that is a huge issue for me when characters aren't consistent throughout the entire series. Jacob in particular felt very inconsistent, and Edward felt very inconsistent. It felt like they drastically changed for no reason. There wasn't just this gentle shifting of their personalities, just all of a sudden they're a new character, and I didn't like that. I did really enjoy it though. I gave it 4 stars. I still think this has the magic of Twilight. You get to meet so many vampires in here, and I love what happened with the werewolves in here, but I just overall think that this book could have been much better. It is a very great book. It just is number 5 on my list. It's not my favorite by any means, but it is really good. And the next one on my list is the Novella, which is The Short Second Life of Bree Tanner. Although I've sort of wondered about whether I should call this a novella or not because it is 178 pages. That's about the length of a small novel. But oh well, I'm just gonna keep calling it a novella because everyone else calls it a novella. I really enjoyed this one. I found this to be really fun and quite depressing actually too, because Bree's whole story is very sad and depressing and tragic. However, I love just getting to like get into the brain of the newborn and see what all these different newborns are like, because the other newborns that you meet in the series don't have like the same newborn experience. But this book really shows what a typical newborn experience is. If you haven't read Twilight, you're probably very confused about who Bree Tanner is, but Bree Tanner is a very minor character in Eclipse, and this is her story. And I mean, it's not her story in terms of like when she was a human, but it's her story of like after she becomes a vampire and sort of like what happens in the time that she's a vampire. Really enjoyed this one. 4 stars, as I said, and this ranks number 6 on my list. 2 more left, and I don't think it will come as a surprise to anyone that these 2 are the last ones on my list. So first of all, both of these next 2 ones are 3-star reads, meaning that I overall enjoyed them, or I thought they were okay, but they were nothing fantastic. And the one that is ranking number 7 is Life and Death, Twilight Reimagined. This is the gender-swapped version of Twilight. I enjoyed this one, but like it had tons of flaws. The ending is particularly what like saved this book for me and made it more interesting. However, my number 1 issue with this book is that none of the characters felt realistic. I've said this before, but it really felt like the author was trying to get the characters to be exactly like their counterparts, like taking their personality traits and making sure that the gender swap versions had those exact personalities, and while doing that she lost track of trying to make the characters feel like real characters, and that was my major issue with this book. It is a good book, but it's nothing special, so it's ranking number 7 on my list. It's still an enjoyable read, it just is not my favorite. And this leaves only Midnight Sun left. Midnight Sun. Jeez. I'm really glad that I got into Twilight later than everyone else so that I didn't have to wait for Midnight Sun, because Midnight Sun was a massive disappointment. It was still a 3-star read. I really enjoyed about the last, I think like 150 pages, but like the rest of the book was completely boring. It's just a monologue of Edward saying the same things over and over again, and there's not that awesome pacing that you had in the original Twilight, because this is obviously the first book but from Edward's perspective, and I think this book would have been more interesting from literally any other character's perspective. Now obviously we have Twilight from Bella's perspective, but I mean like Alice's perspective, Jacob's perspective, although Jacob's perspective of the first book would be like really short, but like this book was just extremely slow and boring, and it didn't pick up until the last 150 pages. So this book unfortunately is my least favorite of the Twilight series, and I am not ashamed to say that. I think most people would agree with me that this is the worst one in the series. So that was my ranking of all of the Twilight books. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, feel free to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to me if you haven't already. I'll include links down in the description below to my reviews for all of this series, because I reviewed each of these 8 books in extreme detail on Goodreads. I think Twilight is a great series, and I think that you should give it a chance if you haven't already, but the way that I enjoy Twilight is that I didn't take anything seriously, and it made it a lot of fun. If you are going into this expecting a serious book that is going to be epic and awesome with the greatest writing ever, you're going to be really disappointed, but go into it thinking that you're going to laugh at things that are stupid and cringy, because then you'll have so much more fun with it. That's why I enjoy this series, because it is so cringy and awful that it makes it good, if that makes any sense. So yeah, if you enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to me. If you haven't already, I upload videos twice a week, so my next video will be uploaded this Friday. I hope all of you stick around to watch that one, and until next time, goodbye!